Welcome, welcome, welcome once again back to Community Conversations here on Love Bay Radio, your number one Afro Caribbean music talk radio online show. I mean, it has been such an amazing opportunity to spend these weekends with you as we have real conversation that impacts our community. And by community, we're talking about those of us in the African, Afro Caribbean diaspora across the world, because you guys are joining us from all over the world. Comment below and let me know where you're joining us from. And if you're confused as to why I said comment below, maybe you're listening to us through the app or through our website, and you don't know that we actually bring these shows live to you on YouTube. So now right now, before we really jump into what we're talking about today, go over to YouTube. That's YouTube at Love Bay Radio and check us out. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button. Make sure that you click the bell so that you get notifications whenever a new show is out. That way, you are always on in the know and always ready for whatever yummy goodness we have coming up on all of the shows for Love Bay Radio. So make sure that you are not missing out. That means that you can actually watch us live and not only listen to us live. So, however, it is that you want to interact with us, whether it is by downloading our app on Google Play or the Apple Store, or by watching us live on YouTube, we invite you to do it right now. And bring your friends. Don't keep a secret when it's this good, right? Bring a friend, tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend that we are here for community conversations every Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, we've been talking about literacy throughout the month of January because January is Literacy Awareness Month. And I was sure to go back and post the link for you last week when we were talking about some things that have been going on in Ontario. So, a lot of the educators that you're hearing from throughout the month of January are coming to us from Ontario. That's Ontario, Canada. And so, we'll be talking really specifically about some of those issues. However, when we do that, we're going to make it so that there's some things, there are nuggets and actions that you can take no matter where you are across the world, so that we can learn together, because that's really what it's about here in community conversations. Not just talking the talk, but walking the walk when it's all done, and making sure that our community is coming together. So let's talk about something new in what's going on. What's going on? This is a question that I had to ask recently when Ontario told us they were making changes. What's going on, Ontario? Please explain to us. And so in 2023, we had all of these announcements that we're going back to basics in education and in literacy and numeracy. And we're going to be teaching phonics again. And we're going to be encouraging children to write on paper. And we're teaching cursive again. And we're going back to learning our times tables in mathematics. We're going back to basics. And of course, I thought, well, interesting. What is this about? Because there was such a tremendous underswelling of support that, all the psychologists said we were supposed to stop doing these things. And, you know, all this fancy stuff came down telling us, well, you have to do it this way from now on. And so, those of us in education who've been in education for a while, we've just been stuck there saying, well, this is what we were taught to do. And now you're telling us, forget everything that you were taught to do. Don't do any of that anymore. It's a complete waste of time. Do this new fancy thing now. And now you're coming back to us and telling us, actually, by the way, that fancy thing didn't work. So we're going to go back to what we used to do. And so I thought, why? Because it takes quite a lot to develop curriculum and implement curriculum across Canada's largest and most populous province. And so, why would we be going back, right? Now, just to let y'all know, I'm in favor of the go back, okay? But I was just very curious as to why we were doing it all of a sudden. And then I found out about the Right to Read report from the Ontario Human Rights Commission, which basically states that the Ministry of Education in Ontario has been violating the right of the child to read. I mean, wow. I mean, I knew that that was happening, but I didn't realize that we had something concrete to actually say that. So, what are some of the changes? If you are watching us on YouTube, if you're catching us on the replay here on Love Bay Radio, your number one Caribbean and Afrobeat music talk online radio, then you are able to check the link in the YouTube below. So that's YouTube slash at Love Bay Radio. You'll see the link below because, again, whatever I learn, you learn. I share it with you. I'm not telling you something that I made up, right? You can always go check for yourself. And if you disagree or agree with my interpretation of what we read, then by all means, comment below and let me know. If you're parents in Ontario, I really want to know what your experience has been with education in Ontario, especially if you're outside of Toronto. Really want to hear what that's like for you. So, there are lots of things that have changed, right? So they've changed and they've broken down by the topic area, and then it tells you exactly what is new in that area. So if you are a parent in Ontario, it's very important for you to make sure that you are aware of exactly what has changed. If you are living outside of Ontario in Canada, or if you are living outside of Canada and your regional body for education, your country, your province, parish, state, if they're looking into education reform, then I strongly encourage you to look at what's been going on in Ontario. Because if you get a chance to vote for policies that you think are going to be more impactful for your children in school, then you kind of need to see what those policy changes look like when they're implemented. So take this as like I can go check and see what Ontario is doing so that I know how to best represent my children here where I am. So some of the topic areas where they have listed the changes include instructional approaches in language. And so now we have words like evidence-based, systematic, and explicit instruction, multimodal literacy instruction, oral communication instructional practices, universal design for learning, and differentiated instruction, the tiered approach to language and literacy instruction. Okay, that's a lot of educator slash politic mumbo jumbo, right? And so, what are they really talking about? Evidence-based, systematic, and explicit instruction. They're talking about going back to the things that have worked. So the Human Rights Commission is saying in their Right to Read inquiry report that children have been going through the school system and they are graduating from the school system unable to read at an acceptable level for an individual who should be entering either higher education or the workforce. So we have evidence of many, many, many generations of adults who have higher level ability to read. And when I say read, I'm not talking about just calling the words on the page. I'm talking about comprehension of what we're reading, right? Actually understanding it. So, first of all, can you read the words on the page? That's the first thing. Do you understand what you're reading? And do you understand it enough to be able to explain it to someone else? And then are you able to take the nuance of what you've learned and apply it to your day-to-day life? So this is the tiered approach to language and literacy reception. And so instruction has to meet that. And so we have the evidence of what has worked for many generations. And if we actually take a moment and go back a little bit, maybe one of your grandparents, you may be surprised if you just stop and listen to the level of vocabulary that uneducated people had many years ago. My grandmother lived to 95 years old, and she was only formally educated up until she was 11 years old, right? So that's class four. If you're in a post-British system, that's fifth grade. If you're in a more modern Americanized system, but she was 11 years old when she officially finished her schooling, and her level of vocabulary was absolutely exceptional with just an elementary education. And she could pick up anything and read it and talk to you about it. So we have the evidence of what has worked. We know the instruction that has worked over the years, but now we're talking about multimodal literacy instruction because times have changed, right? Technology has changed. There's so much more that we can now use to support that evidence-based, systematic, and explicit instruction of of literacy. This is because we were using an implicit instruction. So kind of like if I blow the smell of food past your nose, you should feel full. Okay, so you see how much sense that makes, right? So in implicit instruction, we're kind of having lots of conversation around the topic so that you can then synthesize it for yourself. But when you're 4, 5 years old, 8 years old, is that sufficient? No, this is not what the evidence has shown us over the years. A lot of oral communication and instructional practices, this is particularly important in a province that is so diverse, right? And so when you have kids who are migrating from other countries and English is not their first language, or they use the English language in a different way, that oral communication is prime preparation for their ability to find meaningful work. Universal design and learning and differentiated instruction is talking about making sure that whether you are neurotypical or neurodivergent, whether your body works in a way that is understood to be the normalized, ableist activity that would be expected of a body at any particular time in your physical development, regardless as to where you are on the developmental scale for your mind or your body, you should be able to learn what is being offered to you. So, this is just one little nugget of the things that are shared with us. Again, that link is below on this YouTube video so that you can go read it for yourself. There are lots more there, juicy stuff that we can jump into. And next week, I'm going to share another little snippet of it with you. But if you're in a country that is considering education reform, go check and see what's happening in Ontario right now. I think the particular reason why it's important to talk about it is because nobody's talking about it, right? They didn't actually tell us that they were making these changes because of the Human Rights Commission. They were just like, we just had a great idea and we think we're going to try this now. And that's why it's important to talk about it. Because if you're a parent with a child in school, then you need to know what is going on so that you can make sure that your child has everything that your child needs. So, anyways, I spent a little bit extra time on what's going on because this is so juicy. It is so meaty. And I really hope that you'll go do your research yourself. But right now, I have the joy of bringing up to the stage the lovely Joanne Domenico. Before she joins us, I'm just going to read a little bit about her background. Joanne Domenico is a learning and wellness strategist and academic success coach on a mission to help students of all ages master techniques for more efficient and effective learning. With over 20 years of experience working in diverse educational environments in the Greater Toronto Area, the United States of America, and Bermuda, the self proclaimed study skills master now lends her expertise to Centennial College located in Toronto, Canada. Through her personal practice, Study with Joanne, She offers one to one educational consulting and group workshops to schools and parents seeking to enhance their students' learning capabilities inside and outside the classroom. With a TEDx talk under her belt, Joanne is proven to be an engaging and dynamic public speaker. She speaks to research that confirms the correlation between learning and overall wellness while highlighting the many ways taking care of yourself can help students to be more resilient academically and in life. And if you did not catch last week's with Alicia, you'll hear a lot of conversation on that topic. So go over to YouTube and look for Love Bay Radio and make sure that you catch the replay on last week's conversation that I had with Alicia as well. Yearly, Joanne delivers 100 plus workshops and keynotes and has been featured on several major media outlets where she shares helpful tips on topics such as self care and wellness, time management, dealing with digital distractions, test preparation, and more. As someone who struggled to grasp learning material in school, which I find absolutely hard to believe, Joanne finds true joy in serving this generation by being the person she needed when she was younger. Does she sound like my kind of person, Joanne? Welcome, please, Joanne, up on stage so that we can learn directly from you. I mean, I read your bio, but somehow this is standing out to me because there's no way that I would have thought that you had any kind of struggle at school. So I'm going to pick that first. What was that like for you growing up in school? And kind of what was the moment that you realized that there was a struggle?
Yes. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. Nice to see you. Pleasure to be here. So, yeah, I always start with this story actually in my workshops. I tell students that when I was in high school, I was the kind of student who did okay, but with very minimal effort. Go to class, study the night before, and I ask them, who can relate? Every single hand goes up, right? It's so common. So when I got to university, I was like, I'm going to do exactly what I did in high school. It'll be fine. And for some easy courses it was, but for me, there was one course in particular, anatomy, where this last minute cramming business just didn't cut it. And that was the moment when I got my grade and I realized I failed. I had never failed anything in my life, but that was the exact moment that I realized, hey, wait a second. I actually don't know how to study. Like no one ever taught me. So it really took me failing to come to that realization. So I start with that story because I feel so many students are kind of in the same boat. Even now, I say, raise your hands if you feel like you've ever been taught how to study. And I might get two in a room full of students. And I'm like, who taught you? YouTube or their parent or maybe a teacher, but it's very rare. All these years later, I'm still seeing that same issue.
Wow, wow. So, would you have considered yourself gifted? You talked about going through school, doing okay, but not really trying. If you look back now, would you think so?
No, definitely not gifted. I just think the way we were tested back then, you were tested on your ability to duplicate what you memorized. And so you can get away with cramming the night before. And, so they weren't really testing my understanding or application of content. So those are things you learn in post-secondary when you actually have to learn how to learn more effectively. So yeah,
Mm.
definitely not gifted, but figured out the system, right? And
Right,
how to
right.
use the grades. Yeah.
That's so interesting. And remind me, you grew up and attended school in Canada?
Yes. In Toronto, yes.
Yes. So I find that so interesting that you mention one, the way how you were taught and the way how you were tested,
Mhm.
and how that influenced your own behavior as a student. I remember coming from the Caribbean and preparing to do the SATs
Mhm.
in the US, and that huge Kaplan book. I mean, this is a massive Kaplan SAT book, and it talks about understanding the test
Mhm.
is being more important than the content of the test, understanding how the test works
Right.
and therefore being able to study for the test. And that was such a new concept to me at 16 years old because the way how we're tested on um, on knowledge, like acquisition, right? And so your ability to take the information that you were provided, think it through, process it, and then answer this question,
Yeah.
you know? And we
Yeah.
had this piece of paper. I don't know if you're in any country who uses the word foolscap paper, please let me know. It's like that long.
Legal size. Yep. That's funny.
That term, I don't know if I've heard that term outside of Barbados. So, Joanne, now you talk about that moment when you realized that you needed help, and in your bio, you talk about being the help that you wish you had,
Mhm.
to other students right now. So, tell me a little bit about your practice. What is that help that you offer that you wish you had?
Yeah, so I feel like I actually, I don't know if you're aware of this, but I actually started my career as a school-based occupational therapist. So I work with students in schools, and I feel like my occupational therapy background made me very holistic in my approach as a learning strategist. So when I meet with a student, I really look at them as like the whole person. I'm really big on sort of that brain optimization piece of self-care. So I always start there, because how can I teach you study strategies if you're averaging 4 to 5 hours of sleep, if you're not eating healthy, if you're not exercising? So I definitely start there, and then I move to like screen time. If you're spending 9 hours a day on TikTok or Snapchat, like how are you learning, right? So I feel like nobody taught me that element of it either. So yes, I was missing that piece of the study skills, but I didn't understand the importance of things like self-care and time management and just executive functioning skills in general, and how much of a big role they play in your ability to be competent and to function. So I think I've kind of fused that together in my practice. In fact, it wasn't even me who gave myself the title learning and wellness strategist. It was somebody I was presenting for, and they introduced me as such. And I was like, huh, that's true. Because I do provide, I feel like, just as many wellness strategies as I do learning strategies, because I see them as intertwined.
I love that. I,
Uh,
I love when you're named and then you see yourself in that name. Isn't that so powerful?
yeah.
Um, you touched on executive function.
Mhm.
I want us to break that down a little bit. We have lots of listeners from literally all across the globe. Let's talk about what that means. So you have a child
Mhm.
at any age in school, and but you work particularly with secondary and higher learning. So we're at that point where the frontal lobe hasn't quite developed yet. We're getting a little closer there, but we're not quite there.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit more about executive function and why there actually needs to be some level of training, why it doesn't just happen, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
Yeah, so executive functioning skills are, it's higher order thinking skills where you really learn to organize and plan and execute. And yes, like you said, you do need the prefrontal cortex to be more developed in order to do these things. And I do believe, yes, they need to be taught. And sometimes these skills can be modeled by parents, and that's how children learn. But that's one of the reasons why I don't typically work with students in elementary school. I work with the parents, to help them with routines, and like what is the structure to their day, and how can we build in time to do homework, time to review, etc. But then once they get to middle school, I'll start working with some students, because I feel that by then they have the capacity to start managing stuff. And with learning management systems like Google Classroom and Brightspace, I find it's a little bit easier for students now, because they have a central place where they can go to kind of help them keep track of what they have to do. But even still, some students have a really hard time and aren't even aware of, like, oh, this actually tells you what you need to do. And it's one thing to know what you have to do, but it's another to actually plan when you're going to do it and then actually do it. Right. So it's
Yeah,
just like
yeah.
certain steps to it. So I'm really big on helping the student to determine if they prefer physical or digital, because obviously we live in a much more digitized world right now, but some students just need the simplicity of a calendar, right? Where they can just visually see and access it all the time to keep track of test and assignment due dates, for example, so that they can plan out their time and work on it in advance and not end up doing things at the last minute. So that's just like a simple
Mhm.
example of why executive functioning would be important, to get stuff done on time so you're not rushing and having poor quality work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I like that you talked about the breakdown between when it's best to engage with a child for your services And I think that's also an indicator for parents as to when it's best to have certain expectations of their children as well. So you're saying that in those earlier years and elementary years, it's more about what the parents model
Mhm.
and the practices that they inculcate in within their home life
Yeah.
that then prepares their children for that success later on. And then you're able to pick up in middle school and onward with the
Mhm.
children themselves, especially, I suppose, if they've had this modeling going on before. So let's talk to the busy mom,
Mhm.
right? I know dads, I know, give me a minute, but right now we need to talk to the busy mom, right? Um, who is, she may be working one or two more jobs. She's in the sandwich generation, so she's taking care of younger children and, older family members as well. Her career has been put on hold, and she's struggling with all of these things. She loves her children, but she really needs that evening time for her self-care. How does she manage these two things? How does she help the kids be structured and get their pieces together when she's trying to figure out how to get self-care into her own day? What is something you'd share with a parent at that level?
I'm really big on visual weekly schedules where you can really sit down and map out what your week looks like. It's almost does double duty. It's an analysis of your time and what fills your day. If you map out every day, like when you're at work and when you're going to make dinner and when the kids going to have free time, when are they going to do their homework? It really allows you to see and do something called an implementation intention. So when you're kind of like pre-committing to doing something, it actually significantly increases your chances of doing it. Because many busy moms, and at first I was like, "Are you talking about me?" That sounds like me. Sounds like my life.
Actually, I was talking about me, so
We can all relate. Um, it's really hard to juggle, and oftentimes we try to go with the flow, and we're really just staying afloat. So I find we have to be quite strategic with our scheduling, and even thinking about, when do I have the most cognitive bandwidth, right? And so for some parents, they may think, oh, I'll help them with their homework after because when I first get home, I'm tired and dinner. But maybe your brain is in low power mode at 8 p.m. and the child's tolerance is just done. So it might make more sense to take a quick breather and then do the homework and get it out of the way before dinner. So I think you can't really change what you haven't measured. So if you plot it out and see what you're currently doing and then assess like what can I do differently. So I'm a big fan of that, a visual weekly schedule that's created. And if you want buy-in, have your child create it with you so that they're like, I don't want to do my homework right now, right? That's the most important thing, especially depending on their age. If they're young, that works like a charm. And then post this somewhere where they see it. So whether that's in their room or in their study space or even on the fridge, so they get to see that this is our routine. This is what we do on a day-to-day basis, and it just becomes part of the flow, and then it actually works much better. So a lot of parents have said that's been quite helpful, just to have that structure built in where they can ensure that everybody's kind of getting their needs met in some capacity. Maybe not perfectly, but there's a plan in place for it.
yes, because you can only tweak once you have a plan, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I like that. Do you have a Six Sigma background?
And no.
No? Okay, because you mentioned that you can't change what you haven't analyzed,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yes. And that reminded me of the basic premise of Six Sigma. It's called the DMAIC process. So it's design, measure, analyze, implement, and so let's see for control, right? Right. And so it's that idea that first we're gonna design it. So you're talking about having a plan, sit down with the family. This could be a great family exercise as you're talking about. Get your weekly, you're going to do a dry erase board or a piece of paper or whatnot. Give
Full
everybody pretty full scale. Give everybody pretty colors and
yeah.
and then you put that together and at least for the first couple weeks it's just see how it goes kind
Mhm.
of what's
Yeah.
happening. I'm just breaking it down so that anybody who's watching us can actually go try this out and then, go email, call, DM Joanne and let her know how it works out, right? Uh,
Definitely. And
and so,
I have one more thing I want to add too, though.
okay,
Something that is so crucial, I personally like to do it on a Sunday evening, is time for reflection. Because we'll do the same ineffective, stressful things week after week and wonder why we feel like we're drowning. But if every Sunday you pause and ask yourself, what went well this week? What didn't go well? What changes do I need to make next week run more smoothly? That is a game changer. But often we don't schedule in that time and we just keep swimming. And sometimes we're like, oh my God, we're drowning. So yeah, very
would
important.
you do reflection solo or with the family?
Oh, great question. I think if your family's down, for sure, I would, do a quick check-in. But I think for me, as the one running the household, I need some solitary reflection as well.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So maybe it's a bit fluid. Maybe sometimes it's solitary, sometimes it's all together.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's run through it. So we're gonna go get some kind of mechanism, a dry erase board, a large piece of paper, right
Digital.
on your wall, digital. Yeah. Get your laptops and your phones out, and we're gonna create a plan for the week. Everybody gets their pieces in, we see how it goes, and at the end of the week, we make time to reflect. How did this week actually go?
Mhm.
Did we actually meet all of those needs? Was somebody left out? And then we can try it again next week and you make those tweaks. Okay, so you got your first free bit of consulting from Joanne. That's it for the show. Go DM Joanne if you want to book your schedule in. Joanne, we're talking about literacy all week. Um, I'd love if you can share a little bit about your, especially from that OT background, um, the mechanics of reading, the fluency, the speed, the way how your speech integrates with your reading style. Talk to us a little bit about that, especially for a parent who's kind of looking at their child as their child is growing and wondering, are we on the right track here? How are we doing?
Yeah, so well, I haven't worked as an OT for over 2 decades, but some of the principles still stand out, and how I work with students in reading is very different now, especially at the post-secondary level. But a big part of what I remember from my OT background is looking at students' challenges and whether they need remediation or compensation. So, if a student, for example, has a learning disability that impacts their ability to read effectively, then we can't wave a magic wand and make their ability to read improve. So we may need to compensate with things like assistive technology, text to speech, because perhaps visually they can't process the words. So it is a processing issue in terms of like technically reading the words and processing it. But if they haven't learned how to read, like phonics wise, like you were talking about earlier, then that is something that can be remediated. They can be taught how to do that. So I think that's the first step in sort of assessing, do they have a visual perception problem? Is it, the phonics? Is it the mechanics? Is it the comprehension? So once you know what the problem is, it's easier to focus on the solution. So like at the college level, for example, we have assistive technologists. So people whose job it is to work with the student and assess their difficulties with reading and then recommend the right hardware or software to help compensate. So it's something that I always tell parents is get your child assessed so that at least you know where exactly the problem lies, and then we can better know how to help them.
Yeah, I love that. And for our um, Afro and Afro Caribbean listeners, and anyone else in a similar culture, is spanking your child officially remediation? Does that help your child get the word?
You mean giving them licks?
Yes.
No,
Thank you.
absolutely not.
Thank you. It's so hard to explain that the challenges a child faces with reading isn't necessarily bad behavior. And then the bad behavior that you do experience can stem from them trying to cover the fact that they're struggling. And
Yeah.
so, like last week, we talked about our responsibility as the parent to center ourselves so that we're not retransmitting that trauma from years gone by.
Yes.
So, of all the tools in the toolbox, licks ain't one of them.
Agree
Not
not.
one.
I honestly think, what you were saying, the tagline on the bottom there, is it caught or taught? I think so much more is caught with reading, especially at an early age. So my biggest piece of advice to parents, especially if your children are really young, even babies, even in utero, read, 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 read. Let them see you reading. Let them see piles of books all around the house, and then whatever they kind of express interest in. It. Oh, they're interested in the ocean, creatures of the ocean. They're interested in this. Like, get books on that, and you'll be amazed at how interested they are in reading. Just make it normal. Let's go to the library. It's very different when reading is made to be like a chore versus reading is a pleasurable pastime that people do. So I see a big difference with that. It's great to do as part of the nightly routine. Lots and lots of research on the benefits of that in terms of development, brain development
Mhm.
for sure.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And that also ties back into what you talked about earlier with rest. If we're reading before sleep versus on a device that has blue light before sleep,
Mhm.
the quality of rest that we ourselves and our children experience is so much better. I mean, yes,
Yeah.
that right there. Okay.
Thumbs up. That is the top tip. Yes. Read from a dimly lit lamp or something, and
Mhm.
literally you'll get a surge of melatonin that will lull you to
Mhm.
sleep. When the blue light is on, it literally blocks that melatonin. Your brain thinks it's still time to be awake. So yeah, that is really great advice. Yeah.
Yes, yes. See, I'm learning too. Now, okay, so we just talked about reading, let's say, preferably a book or maybe one of those electronic readers that doesn't have a blue light background. Um, but why I want to give my kid their tablet before bed. They could read Kindle before bed. How do I know what type of technology should I be encouraging, especially my teenager as they're preparing to go off to university? I'm not going to be there to tell them what to do anymore. We don't cuddle for bedtime like we used to when they were 6 and 7.
Yeah.
So, what am I supposed to be doing to encourage my older children, when it comes to technology use and study habits and these behaviors that help or hinder their own self-care?
Yeah, well, I actually have a rule in terms of like digital distractions. I call it the rule of three. So whenever they're studying, their devices should actually be out of sight, out of sound, and out of reach. So out of sight referring to the notifications. So the problem with these devices is that we often have our email and text message and social media notifications. So even if you are reading, you're constantly being interrupted by something, which results in task switching, right? You may have the best intentions to be focused on one thing, but your attention is constantly switching back and forth between the tasks. So decreasing the notifications, turning them off, muting them, and disabling them can help. Out of sound, so we condition our brains to react immediately to any beeps and buzzes we hear, like, who is it, what did they say? So having things on silent. And then best thing, out of reach. So in my home, the iPad is not allowed upstairs. It's not allowed in his bedroom. It's set to downtime. So we have the features enabled that he knows that's his cue. It's time to get ready for bed, because I truly believe at least, I like 60, but for teenagers, I'll say 30 to 60 minutes before bed, no devices, for the exact reason we just talked about, that melatonin production. So I think it's important, again, to also model these as a parent, because if you're like, turn off your screen, and then you're like, Instagram, they're going to be, you're a hypocrite, right? So I have downtime on my phone as well. So yeah, I think sort of establishing those rules for the household
Mhm.
can really, really help. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. A physical book is really your best bet if you want them to read at night. And then, pardon the name, but I also have something called Pioneer Time in my house. It's just an easy way to describe it. I know it's not the best name, but every day on the weekends from 12 to 4, my son is not allowed to be on screens. Just to give him,
Okay, get it. Like
yeah,
the
break.
like the period of time when the pioneers had no got it.
Exactly. So that's just what we named it. My mentor actually came up with the name. That's why I went with it. So he has to read from a physical book. Sometimes he'll play outside, sometimes he'll take a nap. It's just, you can't have a screen. So it's just nice, because otherwise, if you think about it, literally their whole day would be on some type of screen, whether it's video games, television, tablets, phones, etc. So it can be helpful to have that pause for them to just be a kid and reset.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna give another strategy that we use. So that gives you your child is at school all day and comes home from school strategy, right? And so you said 30 minutes to an hour before bed, no devices.
Yeah.
I am super hypocritical about this, so I am going to be doing this myself from now on. Thank you,
Yes.
Joanne. Um, but parents and children, the whole house if possible. But because again, we're modeling and not just instructing.
Yeah.
So no more devices 30 minutes to an hour before. If you can get a physical book, that's your best bet. Dimly lit light, you know, calm setting, etc.
Yeah.
And again, letting your child see you read
Mhm.
as a part of your own mental health and self-care practice so
Yes.
that they can go on ahead um, and be able to do that for themselves when they're in university as well.
Mhm.
For homeschool parents, so you guys know by now that I homeschool and we are world schooling these days. But so we have a drawer where the devices go uh, once we're done with school. So we're not on device all day. There are some apps that we use for learning, but then there's a drawer. And free time is every day from the end of school until uh, dinner time, cleanup time, right?
Mhm.
Um, my daughter has her phone for alarms, right? So she can hear the alarms, and the alarms trying that take us from one, like a school bell, from one session to the next session. And
Yeah.
then there are no alarms during free time, right? So it's basically the end of school is one alarm, and then cleanup time at nighttime is the next alarm. No alarms in between there.
Right.
And then she's only allowed access to her devices on the weekend. She's been on 2 weeks of break, and the device use is driving me nuts. I cannot wait for
Yeah.
homeschool to start back tomorrow to get those things back in that drawer, right?
Weaning
Um, so I've given you guys two strategies. If you are with your child all day long, um, personally speaking, if you're with your child all day long because they haven't started school yet, they should not have a device. That's just me.
Yeah.
But if you are with your child, your school aged child all day long, that's another possible strategy for that reduction of distractions and that device interaction that we get all day long. So before we wrap up here, there's something that it's so pertinent to life living education right now. There are lots of questions that parents have on this, and I think that your perspective would be beautifully critical for them. So we've I don't think there's anybody who's saying no devices at all, no technology at all. We all know that it's useful. It's helping our kids. It'll help them to stay organized. It'll help them to, get through their work. All these things are great. What about AI? As my
Mhm.
teenager is growing up and having more essays to write, going into university,
Yeah.
what should I be talking to my child about when it comes to their engagement with AI and their schoolwork?
That is a great question. AI is here and it's not going anywhere. It's only going to become a more pervasive part of our life. I think the conversation is mandatory because they're using it. They are already using it. So if you don't talk about it, then they won't learn how to use it responsibly and ethically. So I think it's important that they understand that it's to be used as a tool to help them, and it can be used responsibly as a tool, but often they don't know how. So teaching them. Number one, that it's not 100% accurate, teaching them that it's really about how you prompt, teaching them that it can help with things like brainstorming, with processing of information so you understand it. So simplifying and summarizing can be very helpful. But teaching them that if you ask it to write the essay for you, it will. But if your teacher, who sees all these essays and knows how you normally write, realizes that you've used ChatGPT, which they will, then that's going to impact your grade and it's not worth it, right? So it's interesting working in the post-secondary landscape because there's varying perceptions and I guess allowances in terms of what professors will allow. Some are like, no, absolutely not. And some realize they're going to use it anyway. So they've kind of changed the nature of their assessments. Sometimes they're doing more things in class. Sometimes they're asking you to create an argument with ChatGPT and, tell us why your argument is better. And like just being more creative, I think. Yeah. So I've actually been doing some workshops for educators, just talking to them about, how do we keep this human element to us and our role? And how do we teach students how to use this properly? Because they're using it. So yeah, it's been a really interesting conversation. As a learning strategist, I actually use it to help students with all stages of learning, from receiving new content, as a source and obviously checking for accuracy, from processing it to make sure you understand and can like make connections, storage and help with retrieval from quizzing yourself, and then creating outlines and organizing your thoughts, etc. So it's very valuable. I just think it needs to be learned how to use properly.
Yeah. So again, going back to that early conversation on executive function, that prefrontal cortex development,
Yeah.
you know, our children do need to be taught how to use various tools, and AI is another tool.
Mhm.
So for those of us who are, citing old movies that have us terrified of these things. As Joanne, as you said, it's here, it's being used, and we could as well teach our children how to use it
Mhm.
ethically and responsibly. And I like what you said. I find it very interesting that professors are saying, say see what the bot tells you, and then you argue against the bot. That's so clever,
Yeah.
right? And so that also brings back the opportunity for educators to, re-engage where your students are, what's contemporary for your classroom,
Yep.
and to build those strategies around that technology. That's very, very cool.
Yeah.
Well, there's something that we had a chance to chat about, and I do not want our to end the show and our listeners and viewers don't get to hear about this. Tell me about the 80/20 rule.
Oh, so I feel like 80/20 rules can be applied to anything in life. But how I talk about it with post-secondary students is I tell them when you are in high school, 80% of what you learn is the responsibility of a teacher to teach you. You sit down in class, you expect to be taught, and only 20% is your responsibility through homework, projects, assignments, etc. So students are taught this way all through high school, and then when they get to post-secondary, they expect the same thing, but it's actually reversed. And now the reason why it's like that in high school is because that teacher has been specifically trained on how to educate youth. They went to teachers college. That's what they learned how to do. They're professional educators. Now, when you're in post-secondary, it's actually the other way around. Only 20% of what you learn is the responsibility of your instructor or professor, and 80% is your responsibility because you're no longer a youth, you're an adult. And that person who's teaching you in post-secondary, they have not necessarily gone to teachers college. Many of them have not. But what they are at the college level, especially, they're subject matter experts. So all the nursing instructors are nurses. All the accounting instructors are accountants. All the auto mechanics, they're auto mechanics. So they, at my institution anyway, they're amazing. But you hear it all the time that some instructors simply read off the slides. How is that teaching you, right? Everyone's had that experience where they're like, oh my gosh. So when I tell students this, they're like, why am I paying thousands of dollars to teach myself? And I have to explain, well, you're now an adult, and adult learning principles state that when it's self-directed, when you're motivated, you learn much better. And with high school, you go there because you have to. It's the law, whether you're homeschooled or going to high school, public or Catholic, private. But post-secondary, you're choosing to go there. You chose the field you wanted to study. You're paying all this money. So hopefully you've chosen something you're interested in. So when a student hears that and I teach them, you have to be responsible for your own learning. You have to do a lot of learning outside of the classroom. Your instructor is simply there to reinforce what you've already taught yourself, to fill in gaps in your knowledge, and to give you real life experience from real life examples from their own personal experience working in the field, right? So it's very different.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for that, Joanne. And thank you for sharing your insights with us and your strategies and just your loveliness, just your bright beaming smile. There's something else that you shared with us, and I'm going to ask the producer right now as we switch over to our next segment, Community Come Along. We want to showcase the Durham family. And Cultural Center. Yes. All right. So
Yes.
community come along. If you want your nonprofit to be showcased in community come along, make sure to send us a message here at Love Bay Radio. This week we are focusing on the Durham Family and Cultural Center. I'm sharing my screen here so that you can see it. And this is their website. It's durhamfcc.org. So if you are in the Durham area in Ontario. This is somewhere that you can tap into for service. If you are outside of Ontario, take a look at what they have, especially if you are also a nonprofit leader. I really believe in nonprofits learning from one another. So take a look at how they are structured, how they're able to maximize delivery to their community, the ways that they're able to help and see what you can learn from that experience. I want you to see some of this youth work because we're talking about literacy, but they couldn't find the page. I'm so sorry, guys. Um, okay, so for mentorship, uh, here we go. So they have elder to youth mentorship. Um, uh, in the youth mentorship endeavor is for youth between the ages of 12 to 29. They're looking for new mentors. So if you're looking for an opportunity to volunteer and you're in the Durham region, please make sure that you give that a chance. They have events and whatnot coming up. They have their Afro Caribbean food basket. Say less, people say less right now. So unapply. This is 2024, so I hope that they're able to bring it back in 2025. Black Joy Rotary, all y'all people, make sure that you re-up on your commitments to this program. And if you're in the Durham region, go get your culturally responsive food basket. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Joanne, for connecting us with this amazing nonprofit organization. And finally, in more love, we are talking about the way how we love you here at Love Bay Radio as we look to the future as a community. There is so much that we are able to do in the next decade, and therefore the next 5 years, and therefore the next 1 year, and the next month, and the next week, the next minute together. The first thing I want you to do in this moment is to take the time to thank yourself for being a part of these community conversations. We come together and we learn together. And by all means, challenge me. If you think that I said something, you're like, Miss Nadia, I don't think so. Comment below and let me know what you think about the conversations that we're having here. Send in your comments on WhatsApp to Love Bay Radio. Connect with us and let us know if this is truly being impactful to your life or not. Because if it's not, we'll have to change that so that it is truly impactful for your life. Um, and so you take that moment, as Joanne has encouraged us before, to reflect on your week and on your learning and how we've been able to support you in that endeavor to be a lifelong learner. And as you're doing that, think about all the good things that you have received from Love Bay Radio, whether it's community conversations, voices of the millennials, whatever your favorite show is that you tune in for. You follow us on YouTube. You're on our Instagram. Uh, thanks. There we go. Wherever you're following us across the world, make sure that you are deeply connecting with us because there's so much more that Love Bay has to offer you. So, however it is that you're able to get and gain from us, share the love, right? Share the love. There's so many opportunities for you to become a Love Bay just guru. right? Connect other people in your community to the Love Bay community so that they can also have the opportunity to learn from these conversations and turn around then and develop our many small communities. Um, One of the things that I want to make sure that we're able to do together is to just flourish. We are here representing large groups of people across the world. And our ability to flourish is what creates that pathway for our children who come after us to also stand on their own. We stand on the shoulders of giants at this moment. And so we want to be able to provide a higher level and firmer platform for our families, our children, our loved ones to be able to stand and grow with us. So, here at Love Bay Radio, your number one Afrobeat and music talk radio, online radio. We are here to bring the African and Caribbean diaspora together. We're here to make sure that your voices are heard, that you are encouraged, and that you are connecting with people who understand the meaning of what it means to walk through this earth in the castle of your skin, right? And if you didn't get the reference, Castle of My Skin is by George Lamming, a Barbadian author. Go read that book. That could be one of your nighttime books that Joanne suggested earlier. And so, being a part of the Love Bay community gives you access to being able to help others. Whether you participate in our annual gift giving event or you're participating in any of our community outreach and conferences coming up this summer, we will have the Voices of the Millennial Conference coming back because it was such a tremendous success. And we know that our youth, I mean, millennials now, y'all coming out of this youth thing now. You guys are grown now. But as we continue to create the stage and the platform that will encourage this level of development across our communities, we need to elevate these voices. We need to make sure that they are heard. So we will let you know more about that conference that's preparing for this summer as we get closer and closer to the date. Again, if you haven't yet, make sure that you go over to YouTube and follow, right? Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go catch the replays. There are tons of shows there that you'll be able to catch the replays of and engage with us there. And if you do watch us live on YouTube, then when you comment, you'll be able to participate in the show. Like Belinda from Syracuse, New York, who let us know that we're having a great show tonight. Thank you so much, Belinda from Syracuse, New York, for chiming in and being a part of the show today. Wherever you're coming in from across the world, let us know, share that love, connect, communicate with us because we want to hear more and more from you. If there's a specific topic that you want us to cover, let me know that as well. I kind of do have a plan for the year because I'm super type A and I tend to plan lots of things. But nonetheless, I can be flexible. If there's something in your community that's particularly interesting to you, go ahead and comment below this YouTube video and let me know, right? Shout me out on the Love Bay Instagram page. Ask your questions. When you see that we have a guest coming up, ask your question on Instagram before the guest is here, and we'll actually be able to work that into the show. There's so many ways that we want to be able to hear from you. So make sure that you're connecting. Don't just listen. Be a part of the Love Bay family. Come on into the Love Bay fold and share the love with everyone else that you have around you. Again, my name is Nadia Headley, and you have been a part of Community Conversations, where we've been looking at literacy throughout the month of January 2025. We have one more conversation on literacy next week. I can't wait for you to join in on that conversation. And until then, let's just keep the conversation going.